Welcome to Doors to Hope and Healing, an inside look at the many facets of work that is happening at the Department of Children and Families, between our staff, the families we serve, and our community partners. My name is Jaqueline Ford. I have had the honor of working for the department for almost 30 years. And although I may be familiar with many of the topics we bring to you, I have invited experts in those fields to help us dispel the myths and misconceptions that can often be barriers to our work. Join us as we open our doors and invite you to have a seat at our table. Hello, thank you all for being on the set of Doors to Hope and Healing today. This show is a very important show because we're going to be talking about two exceptional young people who need a home. And we're hoping that with all that you're going to share today with our viewers, that maybe somebody who's watching is going to make that call to learn more about the children that we're going to talk to today. But before we get started, I'm just going to have you go around and introduce yourselves. Just talk about, the work that you're doing for youth in Connecticut. Sal, can we start with you?
Sure. My name is Sal Garofalo. I currently work as a social worker out of the Meriden DCF office, predominantly in the doing a lot of work with adolescents, and have just been with the department now for about 21 years.
Wow. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Courtney?
Hi, I'm Courtney Saragusa. I'm a special ed teacher at Oak Hill School in Avon. And I've been doing that for a few years, but I've known Dante for about 4 years now.
Wow, thank you.
And I'm Lauren Pasternak. I will be with DCF 25 years next month. I have known Dante for 2 years, and I'll be very happy to talk about him. He's a great kid.
Well, good. It's a privilege to work with all of you, having been with DCF for as long as I have. To cross paths with the two of you and the work that you're doing is a privilege for me. Let's start by talking about Dante. We have two kids to talk about today. Sal, you're going to present Jonah, and then you're going to talk about Dante. Let's start with why is permanency so important for our kids, Lauren?
Our children and all children need to feel safe, loved, and supported. And if that cannot come from their family of origin, then finding a home that can provide them with that is utmost important for our children, like any other child.
So let's talk about Dante. How old is Dante, and what can you tell us about him as you've gotten to know him over the past 2 years?
Dante is 14 years old. He is quite a character. He has been diagnosed with cerebral palsy, but he is up and moving. We actually have a picture of him walking a small dog down the street. And he also has autism. He is nonverbal, but he can tell you exactly how he feels. He can write out his name. If he wants you to leave, like he did with me the other day, he typed out goodbye and waved. And I told him he was a little bratty and I was going to stay. And then he typed out again, goodbye. He's a character. He fully understands everything that is that goes around him. He is a child or a youth that needs a lot of structure, a lot of routine. He needs to know what his schedule is. So it's important for the family to know that when he comes home, there is a list of what he needs to do, like having take off his backpack, having a snack, doing any schoolwork if they have it, ABA services, working on his ABA services, and then he can have some free time. So it's very important that his schedule is, he knows what his schedule is, and he'll be okay with that. What do you want to add?
Just that he is an incredibly bright boy. He, like she said, can tell you anything. He definitely has his favorite things, but he will, with some coaxing, work on his other skills that are emerging, such as his math and his reading. But he definitely has his favorites. He is a joy to be around. He definitely embodies happiness when he is doing something that he enjoys. And it's a beautiful thing to see. It really is.
Well, I understand that he likes Disney and DreamWorks. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, so what he does is he uses his keyboard and he will type out the things that he's thinking about. So he's thinking about DreamWorks, the penguins from DreamWorks. He'll type out penguins and DreamWorks, and he'll want you to talk about it. And if you know it, he'll like you to say a line from the movie, and then he'll laugh hysterically because it's just his favorite things.
And right now it's Pinocchio. So he will say, "I'm a boy." And I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Yes, you are." And then he'll go like this. I'm like, "Oh, Pinocchio." He loves Shrek the third. It has to be the third. There's one song, was it 4, 3, 2, 1?
Hold Still by you.
Hold Still, and then Wiggle, Wiggle, Wiggle. So he'll have me do that with him, and he'll wiggle when I move him like this, and he'll wiggle. But he laughs the whole time doing it. Then, of course, he repeats it 20 times, and I'm like, okay, my body's too old to do this 20 times, so we'll stop it. But he really is. He's a joy. He's a really great kid.
Yeah.
Talk to us about some of the limitations that he has, especially around electronics as well. Yeah. I think it's important for our viewers that are watching to get a full, idea of what he needs, what Dante needs, and what would be the best home for him. And I think that, that transparency that we're sharing today is important for our viewers to hear. So let's talk about his limitations.
Electronics is definitely something that needs to be limited. When he was residing home during COVID, that's all he and his mom did were be on the tablet or being on the phone, and that's his preference. It took us several months to get him off the phone when he was in foster care, and now that he's at the hospital, they're actually working to decrease the phone as well, the tablet as well. So having the tablet or the phone as a privilege to work towards is important, not for him to get it whenever he wants. Communication, he needs to have a communication board so he can type out what he wants and what he needs. That is very important for him too. As I said before, scheduling, if you don't have a schedule, that's going to be very difficult for him because he doesn't know what to expect. So he needs to know what to expect when it's expected. So what we did with the board is he would check off the activity. That way he knew it was done. The other thing is he is eating everything by mouth. You just have to make sure it's cut in smaller pieces, because if he knows at the end of that eating it's tablet time, he'll shove everything in his mouth to get to the tablet. So cutting it up and pacing him is important. Keeping his head up is important for him. And just maintaining his medical and his dental needs. He's got quite a few, but he's all up to date with everything but his dental at this point.
And I know we're going to get into some of the medical and developmental care that Dante needs, but Courtney, do you want to add anything about the restrictions or any?
Like you said, it's mostly based on technology. We at school, we completely took it away, and he's slowly earning time on the smartboard. So he's not having a tablet in front of him, but he does get, if he does his work and does it without a fight, he gets it at the end of the day. And he is so skilled, he'll find exactly what he's looking for.
So it's a work towards privilege that you're getting at.
Yes.
So let's talk about his medical and developmental needs.
Medically, he sees quite a few medical providers, urology, pulmonology, gastroenterology, neurology, his primary care, his dental, and I'm probably forgetting one or two. So he does have a lot of medical appointments. They're all up to date. So the medical appointments are usually every 4 to 6 months. So that's been decreased quite a bit. He was on a G tube. That is now he's taking everything by mouth. So we don't. The only thing we use a G tube for is just to rinse it. He's not using the G tube at all. The GI is thinking of taking it out while he's inpatient at CCMC. So that would be great news. He does fine at the doctor's appointments as long as he keep the cell phones away. He rides fine in the car to and from the doctor's appointments, and he pretty much cooperates at the doctor's.
And when we talk about his ability to communicate, talk a little bit more about this. Is it a separate device than the phone that he's using, a tablet, to communicate and type in what he wants to talk to you about?
So at the hospital, he is using an instrument, and he's also using a paper keyboard.
Okay.
We prefer the paper keyboard, only because any electronics is going to trigger him, number one. And number two, he won't distinguish between the electronics being for communication and electronics being for play. So the school said, nope, we're going to do it this way and have just a plastic communication board. He can actually spell really well. The other day he typed out the with the TTHE, and he deleted it all and typed out THE.
Wow.
So he spells things beautifully. So we do use a paper communication keyboard with him. We do not use electronics with him.
Okay.
And he's very comfortable using it.
Which speaks to when you said he's a bright
He
teenager.
is.
And I think that's good to know for our viewers watching on the best ways of methods for him to communicate. What about how important is a structured environment for Dante, both at school and at home?
Extremely. Dante is the type of kid that needs to know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and where it's going to happen. He may not be happy with it at times, but if you stick to it, he'll grudgingly do what he needs to do in order to get the privilege. But he needs to have structure, routine.
And is that the same at school?
He needs the structure, routine. We often utilize timers because when he knows his schedule, he will like to try to rush it to get to the things that he wants to do. So he'll tell you, oh, it's time for lunch. Well, not quite, but what time is lunch? And then we'll put the timer on for him.
Okay. So he just likes to know what to expect, and that reduces his level of anxiety or worry about that. When we talk about placement history for him, and we don't have to talk about the other foster homes or placements that he's been in, but you two have a vested interest in him and you've known him for a long time. What do you feel would be the best placement for, what type of home do you feel that Dante would fit best into?
I think a 1 or even a 2 family home. If the children are older, I think that would be good. I'm not too sure about younger children in Dante because he can act out. Someone who can give him the time and the attention and the care that he needs. He's doing a lot of his, learning a lot of his daily living skills, so he will need help with that. He does wear diapers, so you're going to have to be comfortable changing an adult diaper. But someone who's able to give him the time and the attention that he needs. He's really a great kid. I can't say it enough. He just needs someone to be there when he needs it.
I agree. I think older kids would be nice. I think he does like interacting with peers. I don't know about younger, but he also likes animals. So a home that has an animal. Okay. He has a love for, at least I know of dogs. So
Dogs and a ferret.
Yeah.
And fair. And do you have any dogs that come into the school?
We don't at the moment, no.
And speaking of school, is it your plan for him to continue at the same school moving forward?
Yes.
So wherever the family was identified or come from, we would be working with them to keep that consistent for him. I know we try to keep as much consistent for our kids as we can.
Correct.
Let's talk a little bit about that. So if,
The school-
if someone watching lives maybe not in Avon, but is interested in Dante, you would work with them
Yes.
to ensure that he can still maintain
Correct.
that same school program.
Yes.
So currently he's at the hospital and he's going to be going to a group home in New Britain, and we've already been in talks with West Hartford Board of Ed, because they're the Lexus. They're the ones who take care of his transportation and the cost for his education. And they're all set to transport him from New Britain to Avon.
Okay, that's perfect. So I'm going to move on our conversation with Sal, but before I do that, if any of our viewers want more information about Sal, how can they get in touch with you?
About Lauren?
I mean, about Dante. How could they get in touch with you, Lauren?
They can call me at 860-818-5467, or they can email me at lorin.pasterak@ct.gov.
Okay, thank you for that. And we'll come back and we'll share that information again, and we'll also have it on the screen so that if anybody's interested in learning more about Dante, they'll know how to reach out to
Thank
you.
you.
You're welcome. So Sal, tell us about Jonah.
So Jonah, he's a very fun young man. Jonah is 11. He will be 12 in December. Jonah came to us shortly after, unfortunately, his dad had passed away, and came into our care at that time. Jonah is nonverbal. He's wheelchair bound. He's fed by a G-tube. He's very outgoing, considering all his different disabilities that he has. He's non-mobile, non-verbal. He has a lot of visual disabilities with his perception. Has some disability with his hearing. He had been diagnosed with hydrocephalus, which was like basically water on the brain when he was born, which led to a lot of his developmental, physical, and intellectual impairments. So he is wheelchair bound, and but he does go to school in the community. He's able to take a van back and forth to school. He was going to school when he was home, and went to school in the community when he was home living with his dad. And, he still has some family members that, are involved. I mean, his mom, who unfortunately can't care for him, but is a very big resource, emotional resource for him. She still remains involved with him. His paternal grandfather and maternal grandmother also are visiting resources. They do see him very regularly. He currently resides at the St. Lawrence group home in Stratford. And so he lives there and then goes to school from there each day. He goes to school year round, doing very well. He's well cared for there, up to date medically, very similar to Dante in that he has a lot of providers, also through CCMC. So he has a lot of different, GI and different, providers that work with him through CCMC. But he's up to date with everything. Like I said earlier, he does have a G-tube. That is something that has been long-term for him. One thing that Jonah is like I said, he's very fun to be around. There's a part of him that, when I go to see him, you'll come up and I can tap him on the shoulder and I'll say, Jonah, and he just lights up. He just lights up and he starts to giggle. He starts to laugh. And it's more so with men. We find even the staff there will say the same thing, that he reacts to men differently. And I think that's because he lived with his dad for so long. And even with his grandfather, when his grandfather visits, they say they see the same thing. Even though he loves his time with his mom and his maternal grandmother and interacts with them, when grandpa comes, they see the same kind of interaction. And so he'll mimic things. He'll do things with you. And so when he sits with me, he will mimic sounds, I'll say, we playing football today? And I'll give him the old hut hut, and he'll just bust out into a like a belly laugh. And he'll just, you'll see him just light up. Sounds, he loves birds. There's something about birds he loves. Like if you put birds on a TV or something like that, he can kind of see the movements. And staff has put like a bird feeder outside his window now, where he just loves the sight of the birds coming to the bird feeder. And it's just something that it entices him, So now we've gotten to the point where, I do the caw and different sounds, and he just loves it. So he has a couple of favorite toys that he just enjoys. And one of them is like a toy guitar that plays different sounds and music. And he will sit and hold that thing and just manipulate it to play different sounds and different things. And another one is like a freestanding sunflower that will actually move and mimic. If you talk to it, it will repeat the same thing back to you.
Wow.
Or play sounds. So if I'm talking like we are now, it will repeat what we're saying. Or if you mimic a sound or something. So Jonah will actually make sounds just so that the sunflower will actually make the same sound back.
Wow.
And he will do this for hours. And he just loves these two things. And so they've actually implemented those toys into his educational component through occupational therapy, physical therapy, those type of things in the school setting, to help him also work with making choices now in part of his occupational and physical therapy in school. So they've gotten him now where, if you put two choices in front of him, getting him to be able to kind of like hopefully reach for what he wants in that moment, and getting him to start making choices for himself. And so that's what they're working on now. They just got him involved with aquatic therapy, where they're starting to do some aquatic therapy to help with his muscle movement, because he's confined to his wheelchair for the most part. And so they're working on that piece, and they've got him involved in music therapy because he loves music so much. So they're doing that piece with him as well.
So tell me about, so he's in this group home setting. Why is it important for him to be with a family? Why are you looking for a family setting for him?
So I think, again, he's young in that he'll be 12, like I said, in December, but it would be nice for him to know that he has somebody for him long term. Again, he still has that emotional bond with some biological family, but to have someone to grow with and have that permanent resource for him going forward for the rest of his life, and knowing he has some stability and permanent resource going forward for the rest of his life, I think it would be huge for him.
Sure. And that same person every day,
absolutely.
Where we know that staff change and sometimes staff leave and the group homes, and to have somebody commit to him.
And as much as they love him, and teachers that he's worked with in the past love him. And there is one other thing too, in that the home that he lived in, his grandfather did a lot of renovations in that home after he left and made it handicap accessible, and has made it clear that he'd be willing to let a family, if they were wanting to, move into that home to care for Jonah.
Wow.
So he'd be willing to let a family come in there, care for Jonah. I mean, he's already renovated the whole bathroom, made it handicap accessible. He'd let a family come in if they wanted. And a family would, again, would have to be willing to commit long term and be willing to, be a lifelong commitment for Jonah, and take on that role and be willing to work with providers. And Jonah had providers when he lived at home with Dad. So Dad wasn't doing it all by himself. They had All Point would come in during the day and do a lot of his nursing care and help him with a lot of his, medical stuff during the day. Get him ready for school, get him on the van, get him off to school. And then when he came home, they would help him throughout the day until bedtime. And then, he was overnight with Dad, and then that routine would start every day again. So there are supports for that family. If there is a family that would be willing to step up, there would be support for that family coming in as well to give them that assistance that they would need as well. But Jonah, there are some things that are helpful in that he can go out into the community. He can go to school. There are things he can do, and, the family is willing to work with them, and they just want to be a part of his life too. They just, unfortunately, his grandfather's in his late 80s, and his mom just unfortunately can't, due to her own limitations, can't take care of him herself, but they still want to maintain that relationship, and they have such an emotional bond, and he loves the time he spends with them. So any family that would be willing to take on that role, hopefully be willing to maintain that established bond with their biological family as well.
Well, I guess that's my question. I mean, it sounds like this boy has so much love in his life, and just due to, like you said, the mom's limitations and the grandfather's age, that they're not able to make that lifelong commitment on a daily basis. Would this be an open adoption? Are you looking for someone to come forward that would be willing to allow the family to still stay active with him?
Yeah, either an open adoption or even a long-term foster care if possible. I mean, I know, mom is just really wants to make sure that she stays involved in his life. She just really wants to make sure that she can still have that relationship. She doesn't want to lose that. That's very important to her and for Grandpa too.
Oh, sure, sure. I mean, he just had a loss with the loss of his dad, and to think about losing any other family member who loves him, according to what they can do for him.
Right, absolutely.
So if any of our viewers are watching and they're interested in learning more about Jonah, how can they contact you?
So they can reach me at 203-238-8421, or they can reach me through email at Salvatore, S-A-L-V as in Victor, A-T-O-R-E, .Garofalo, G-A-R-O-F as in Frank, A-L-O, @ct.gov.
Thank you for that. And we'll have that information on the screen. I think that, in listening to all of you speak about, Jonah and about Dante, they're really lucky to have all of you in their lives too, to advocate for them and to have gotten to know them, due to their own limitations and their medical issues. And is there anything else that you think is important for our viewers to know? I mean, this is a big commitment for someone to step forward to make. And, and with Jonah, and also you're almost fostering the family too,
Absolutely.
which, for that child, that is what he needs. He needs to have that continued relationship with his family. Is there anything else that you think is important for our viewers to know about your kids?
Well, just as you said that it was important for them to have us in their life, but it was also important for us to have them in our life. They, they make this job worthwhile.
Yeah, I could feel that. I could feel that in the way that you're genuinely talking about these kids, and just the joy you say they bring into your lives, and that joy they can bring into one of our viewers' lives. Someone who's listening and wants to learn more about these kids. And then we have other kids too at DCF that are very similar situations, sadly, to Jonah and Dante, and they also need resources and supports in the community. So if somebody's interested in these two children, would they have to go for a training to be able to become licensed to care for them?
Yes, so they would have to go through basic training, then they would have to go through the medically complex training, and then they would have to do the child-specific medically complex training.
Right. Because these resources would be child-specific for these two kids, and they would learn how to take care of them. And there's funding, financial supports available, and all different supports available. They won't be doing it alone. They won't be doing it on their own.
With Dante, he's already qualified for 40 hours of ABA services, so they would go in the home for 40 hours a week and help.
Well, that's I mean,
and Jonah would same thing. He'd be qualified for services as well.
Okay, well, thank you all for being on. As our viewers are watching, they're seeing on the screen pictures of the children that you're speaking about today. And I, hope that who's ever watching, if you're interested in learning more about Dante or about Jonah, there's a telephone number and email address that you will see on your screen to reach out. And if you're interested in learning more about foster care and adoption in Connecticut, you can call 1-888-KID-HERO. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.